In this presentation, we will enter and pay sales tax within QuickBooks Pro 2019. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are on the home page. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view drop-down up top and selecting open windows lists. What we're going to do here is we're going to pay sales tax. The pay sales tax will be in the vendor section of the home page. You can see it's kind of floating up here. It's not really connected to anything. And the reason for that is it's related to the vendors in a few different ways. But it doesn't really flow exactly into the flow chart because it is something that's kind of outside the normal business process, meaning it's going to be something that will be government imposed. So it's kind of an infringement in that we have this tax that we have to collect and then sell, and then give to the government, give to the state typically. Now, it's going to be sales tax in the U.S. It's going to differ from state to state, and there's going to be different type of rules for different states with the sales tax. And if another state, in other countries, it may be called a usage tax or something like that, but it's going to be tax on the transaction that takes place, typically on transactions of goods as opposed to services, at least in the U.S. So depending on the state, we'll have different sales tax rates, and those sales tax will typically be on types of goods that we will have. So the process within the sales tax then is really down here in the customers section. So you'll note in the customer section, when we make an invoice or we make a customer receipt, we end up having sales tax. So you might ask, well, you would think then that the sales tax icon would be down here somewhere in the customer section because it really completes that in some ways. But the reason it's up here in the vendors section is because the person we're paying in the sales tax, we're paying someone that we owe in a sense. And that's going to be the name for a vendor. So the person we pay or the company that we pay or the state that we pay will be set up in QuickBooks as a vendor. So we're paying a vendor. That's why it's up here, even though it's in a way completing the customer cycle in some format. So let's just think about what is happening to collect the sales tax, and then we will go through the concepts of paying the sales tax. When we create, say, an invoice, let's go to an invoice here. I'm going to open an invoice and go back to an open invoice. So I'm just going back to this invoice. Now, this is a guitar that we had. It's an Epiphone semi-hollow wood, and it was $400, and then we had sales tax on it. So it was $400 times the 5%, which is the sales tax that we just picked for this problem. It's going to vary from state to state. We could have multiple different sales tax, and we might have multiple different items for different states of sales tax. And then that's going to be $420 that we expect to collect then. As we collect the $420, only $400 of it is ours. The other $20 we put into an account, a liability account called sales tax payable, because we're going to have to pay it in the future. So we are accumulating all of these sales taxes as we're supposed to do or required to do by law, not because we get to keep it, not because we wanted to charge the client for another $20, but because we need to then take that money and give it to the government in some way. So we're going to close this back out. That same thing, of course, is true on the sales receipt. So if we go to the sales receipt and we go back to a sales receipt that we had, here's a $500 guitar we sold. Again, we had 5% sales tax on it, $25. So the payable that we have, the amount we are owed, is being generated, being created from the invoices and the sales receipts. Let's close this back out. Then we're going to go to the reports. We're going to go to the balance sheet by going to reports up top, company and financial, go down to the balance sheet standard. Balance sheet standard. We're going to change the date range by going to the customized report, and we're going to change the date range from 01/01/19 to 12/31/19, January through December 2019, the time period we are working on here. We say OK. And if we scroll down to the liabilities, then we've got the sales tax payable here. That's what we owe. So this is what we owe at this time. And you can think about it, well, it's a vendor. So we're basically just going to write a check, and we could think about just writing a check to this vendor, and that would be decreasing the cash and decreasing this payable. That's what's going to happen. But we have that special kind of tracking button within the system which helps QuickBooks to track the information and may make the process a little bit easier, and we'll take a look at that. If we double click on this item, we'll see that it's made up of invoices and sales receipts. So these are all invoices and sales receipts, and we can see the amounts are similar to the invoice and sales receipts that we looked at. Now, when we go through these, there's going to be different types of options on when we have to pay the sales tax. So clearly we have to collect the sales tax and then pay it at some point in time. And so, for example, we may have until the end of the following month in order to pay the previous month. So in the month of January, we may have sales tax up to this sale, the sale that happened in January, which we do not owe until the end of February. That might be depending on the rules of the state or the region we are in who's charging sales or usage tax, one way they could set it up. Or if we don't have a lot of sales tax, then often the government is more willing to give us more time and say, hey, we only need you to pay us quarterly, possibly. And so we would collect sales tax for 3 months and then pay it at the end of the following month. Or even yearly if our sales tax is fairly small, depending on the government that we are in. So that's what we got to keep in mind here. When we want to know when the dates are that we have to pay sales tax, meaning when do we have to stop accumulating the sales tax and when is the sales tax owed for a certain time period. So it's not quite as easy for us to say, oh, it's time to pay sales tax and we have sales tax of 223. Let's just write a check for the 223. If we did that, we could start getting mixed up in terms of which sales taxes have we paid and which have we not paid, and we're paying a little bit early, which we don't have to do. We'd rather pay later, typically, if possible. So what we want to do is the system that QuickBooks will set up will make it a little bit easier for us to say, these are the sales tax items that happened in January, and we're going to pay them in February, and we're still going to have some that will be owed because we have not yet paid the sales tax that has accumulated for February, which we will pay in March. Also note that this is a really important issue in terms of if you want to go back, if there's mistakes in going back and changing mistakes. For example, if you went back and changed this invoice after you had paid the sales tax, then it would affect the sales tax that should have been paid. So if you went back, for example, if we went back and we changed the date on this to February, then it's going to affect, and we already paid the sales tax for January, then we could end up paying the sales tax twice. So note that going and changing transactions that are in the past after something has closed, after we've paid the sales tax on it, after we've done the tax returns on it, is something we want to be very careful of for these types of reasons. So payroll is the same type of thing. We want to be very careful. Any prior transaction related to payroll, related to sales after we pay the sales tax, related to basically anything after we've done the tax return at the end of the year. So I'm going to close this back out. We're going to go back to the home page. We'll go back to the home page. And again, we could just write a check to try to figure out what we should write the check for, to who we owe. But we're going to use the little widget up here, the Manage Sales Tax widget in the Vendors section, to hopefully help it make it a little bit easier for us to pay this sales tax and set up the system that has been set up for us in accordance with the place that we are at that set up the sales tax. As we go in here, it's going to give us some reports and some information that we can find generally in other places, but it tries to put it all in one place. So we have first the sales tax preferences. So we had set these up when we had first set up the information for the company. It also can be found in Edit and Preferences. So here, if we just jump to the sales tax preferences, we'll go to those preferences, to the sales tax items, and these are going to be the one place where we can set up the preferences for the sales tax as we did when we set up the company, went through those preferences. We're going to close this back out. We also have some quick reports that they're going to help us set up. So it's sales tax liability. If we select this item and we select the range that we're looking at, 010119 to 123119, then we have the sales tax liability set up here. So it's sales tax, total sales, non-taxable sales gives us the taxable sales. So in other words, we had total sales. In our case, all the merchandise, the guitars, the inventory is taxable sales. All the service items, the maintenance on the guitar, anything like that, is going to be non-taxable. So if we take total sales minus the non-taxable, the service items, that gives us the taxable items. It's all taxed at the same rate because we are all in the same location, which we just chose 5% for this particular problem, meaning the sales tax is the 223.37. Now, we may want, this is for the whole year. If we might just be running it through January 01/31/19. This might be what we're paying at this point in time, because we're not going to pay, even though it's February, we've entered data through February or partially through February. We're not going to pay the sales tax yet for it. So that's one report we can look at. If we close this back out, the other report, sales tax revenue summary. Once again, I'll change the dates from 01/01/19 to 12/31/19. And then we're going to have the taxable sales, the non-taxable sales. Again, breaking out the sales for which there should be tax, which could help us to think about what the tax should be. If we take this taxable sales times 5%, then that should give us the tax, given our fairly simplified area where we only have one area that we have sales tax on, rather than different regions with different sales taxes. So that will be that. Closing this back out. Then we have the related tasks, view sales tax items. So if we go to the view sales tax items, this will give us a list of the sales tax items, and we set those up in the lists, item lists. So if you go to lists, item list, you'll see this sales tax item. That's where we're going to set up that 5%, that sales tax for this region and the vendor who we're going to pay, which in our case is the state of New York. It's a made up vendor, but there's the agency we're going to pay. That's a vendor. So we'll close that back out. We're going to say, New York does have sales tax, but we're just giving this an example problem with not actual rates or actual vendors that are the actual vendors. So we're going to open the sales tax code list, and this will give us the items that show up on the invoices as either tax, means sales tax. That's a quick note for us on the invoice to say, hey, this is sales taxes on there, as opposed to non, which just means it's a non-taxable item. So these are going to be the codes for us. We may have multiple codes other than that if we have other regions, of course, with different sales tax areas and different rates and whatnot. We may need more complex codes than that. And then adjust sales tax. If we need to make an adjustment, we can use this item here. So now we're going to go to the pay sales tax, and we're going to say that it's going to go from the checking account. We're going to say the check date is going to be 02/28/19, and then the show sales tax due is going to be the end of the first month. So I'm going to say 01/31/19. So in other words, we're going to write the check as of this day. This is the day, and this would be the day, of course, that we would be on, probably the current day that we would write the check. And this is going to be the day that we're going to end the sales tax, meaning I want the system to calculate sales tax up to this point in time, because it's February right now, but I don't want to pay sales tax in February. We're assuming that the system of sales tax we are in is one in which we have to collect sales tax through January and then pay January sales tax by the end of February. So we have the next month to pay it. That's an assumption that could change depending on the region we are in and how much sales tax we owe. And so we're going to say this, and we're going to give the starting check number will be the 1016. That's going to be given by the system, and it'll be the next check number in line. We'll check this off in order to pay there. Clear selections, we'll just clear that. If we need to make any adjustments, if we think that this is wrong for some reason, and we got to say, oh, we know why it's wrong, and we're just going to make an adjustment there, we can adjust it here. And then we could say if we want to print it, we can go here, and again, that'll print it if we have the pre-formatted checks that we could then put into the printer and print it. If we're going to write the check by hand, but use the system to create the check in the system, then we would not check this, as we'll do in the practice problem. And we're going to say OK, and then it should generate that. Now, to check this, we can go to the check register, and then we'll go to the forms. So I'm going to close this back out. And we'll go to the banking. We'll go to use register. And here's the check register checking. I'm going to say OK. And we should have a check down here. So here's the check. And notice it gives another special kind of QuickBooks item. It says tax payment, which basically means it's a check for tax payment. So here's the check number. Here's the vendor that we set up as we set up the item. So that's who we paid to. Sales tax payable being the other account. If we double click on this, that'll bring us to an actual check. we might say, hey, I don't remember writing a check. We didn't. We used the little widget that sales tax they put in there to help us hopefully manage this check process more easily. But in essence, all we're doing is writing a check for the sales tax that had been accumulated in January, which we can see on the balance sheet that we then paid by the end of February. So it's just, the check is the same, except we got this little sales tax payment information item down here rather than the area we usually put the other account. So if we close this back out and take a look at the forms, then go into the balance sheet, and we're going to go to the balance sheet sales tax payable and double click on that item. And then here we have the sales tax accumulating. Again, it accumulated up here until January, and then it kept going through February. We kept collecting sales tax, but then we paid the sales tax for January. So if we were to add these up, in other words, it should add up to $123.37, which we then paid. And then what is going to be left? Well, we can add these up. 25 plus 25 plus 30 plus 20 is the $100 that are left, those being sales that were made in February that are still due. We'll pay those in March. If we double click this payment, we're going to find our check there. The other side of this will be, of course, in the checking account. So I'm going to close this out, go up to the checking account up top. Here's the checking account. Double click on that item, scroll to the bottom, and here's the other side, the $123.37 check here that we're paying to the New York State for sales tax. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.